This is lesson 3-1, proportions. Let's first discuss what proportions are. Proportions are equivalent ratios or fractions. There are two things that you can do with proportions. The first thing you can do is you can test for equivalency to see if the two fractions are equal. What you'll do most often is you'll find missing values involved in proportions. What you'll be doing for your project is definitely finding the missing values, because you're going to need to do portion conversion for your recipes. Both procedures, testing for equivalency and finding missing values, are completed by using cross multiplication. This is a procedure that you should be familiar with since middle school. Here are some examples to start with for testing for equivalency. State whether or not the ratios form a proportion. Pause the video at this point to give yourself a chance to try the examples on your own. Okay, so to start, with 2 over 20 and 3 over 30, to see if it's proportion, we set them equal to each other. We then are going to cross multiply. Typically when I cross multiply, I try to circle the things that I need to multiply, like so in black. I then multiply 20 times 3 to get 60, and 2 times 30 to get 60. Since 60 is equal to 60, these two ratios form a proportion. How about 7 over 9 and 14 over 16? Set them equal to each other. Cross multiply. 7 times 16 gives me 112. 9 times 14 gives me 126. Those two numbers are not equal, so 7/9 and 14/16 do not form a proportion. Here are some examples of how to find missing values. Pause the video at this point to give yourself a chance to do both examples. Let's start with the example on the left. Cross multiplying would give me 4x times 10 and 30 times 24. That gives me 40x equal to 720. Now I have an equation to solve. It's a one-step equation, so I'll follow all of my steps that I did last chapter. Drawing a mirror, dividing by 40 on both sides, using the division property of equality, to get x equal to 18. On the right-hand side, personally, I think the most important thing to do to start is to put parentheses around 12 minus x. That's going to remind you to use the distributive property when you create an equation. I'm going to cross multiply to get 30 times x and 10 times the quantity 12 minus x. And then I'm going to draw my mirror and perform the distributive property on the right side. That gives me 120 minus 10x. Now I need to get x on one side. I'm going to eliminate the negative 10x by adding 10x to both sides using the addition property of equality. That gives me 40x equal to 120. Then I divide both sides by 40 using the division property of equality to get x equal to 3. So how does this apply to your project? Suppose your recipe for 10 people, and the recipe calls for 1/3 teaspoon of baking powder. So how can we convert it to serve 25 people? Because there may be 25 people in your class. Pause the video at this point to see if you can figure out how to convert the measurement. So the answer is just kind of like what we did before. We need to set up a proportion. So to start, 1/3 teaspoon is for 10 people. I don't know how many for 25 people. So that's why x goes on top of the fraction with 25. The missing value, the value that you don't know, should be represented by x. Then cross multiply. I'm going to end up with 10x is equal to 8 1/3. Now in my situation, because I'm using 1/3 teaspoon from my recipe, I'm choosing to use fractions because it will be easier for me in the end. If you want to use decimals, you can. I think with the use of your scientific calculator, it might be easier to use fractions. Now, dividing both sides by 10 using the division property of equality gives me x equal to 5/6. So therefore, when I'm making the recipe for 25 people, I need 5/6 tablespoons of baking powder. Please make sure that you're doing all of your work for your project on paper first and showing one of your classroom teachers prior to putting it in a Microsoft Word document for your project.